This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Welcome to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner, licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. Moments of Clarity's mission is to educate and end the stigma on mental health through the inspirational stories of our exceptional guests. You can join in the show by calling Tiffany toll-free at 866-826-1340 or on Facebook and Twitter at MOC with Tiffany. Now, here's Tiffany Werner.
Hi, thanks for listening. This is Moments of Clarity. I'm Tiffany Werner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm your host. And I'm excited for today. We are going to be talking about anti-bullying and suicide prevention and so many things. I want to first say hi to Ed behind the glass. And Ed, hi.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yes.
I have a really great guest today. I'm excited. He's a YouTube sensation. I actually was approached by a 13-year-old with a tear in his eye and said, you have to see this. And it was a YouTube video of his TEDx talk, and it was titled, I Was Almost a School Shooter. And it really hit home, especially with everything that's been going on today. And I reached out, and he was really, really nice. And he's agreed to be on the show today, and I'm just excited to have him all around. And I want to welcome to Moments of Clarity, Aaron Stark.
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
Hi, Aaron. Man, you've really touched a lot of souls with your talk and with your journey, and I'm so honored to have you here.
Thank you. I never in a million years even imagined that me talking about the darkest times in my life could help anybody, but if it can help anybody at all, I'll keep talking no matter what.
Isn't that funny?
I help people find a way out of dark.
Right, and I love that about you. So let's start in the beginning. Talk about your journey, and I want to welcome callers to call in 866-826-1340. 866-826-1340. Call in if you have any questions or feedback or stories of your own. But go ahead, Aaron.
All right. Well, I was born in 1979 in Oregon. My mom and my father, my birth father, were just my birth father was extremely violent. I grew up in a really, really violent home. It was like living in a Stephen King movie. Lots of beatings, I watched my mom get raped right in front of me. I was sexually and physically abused. There was a lot of violence on every kind of level. And that was like the first 4 or 5 years of my life. And we spent a lot of that time running from battered women's shelter to battered women's shelter to get away from him. Like, there was a time that he came and kidnapped my brother and I and told my mom that we were dead. I was dead and my brother would be dead if she didn't show up at this bar. And thankfully he was lying and they were able to capture him. But it was just lots of terroristic activity. And then when she finally left him, we moved in with my stepdad, and that turned from a Stephen King movie to more like Scarface, where it was a lot of heavy, heavy drug use, a lot of stealing entire toy delivery trucks. They would steal the trucks that are going to the store. They would steal the whole truck and then take it to the flea market and sell all the stuff off to the flea market. And it was we were moving from place to place a lot there. Instead of running in fear from my father, we were running in fear from the authorities. So every time that a cop would get close or a social worker would get close, we would disappear and we'd vanish. And so the effect of that for me was that I was constantly the new kid. I went to like 40 different schools. So we moved every couple of months.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. Between 30 and 40. So many I can't count. It's just so many schools. Even if I try to think back to even a single year, it's like, well, yeah, there was that one, and then there was that one, and then there was that one. And it's because we would, like I said, there was a lot of times where I would be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning with someone throwing a duffel bag at me saying, gather all your stuff, we need to get out of here. And I'd have like 15 minutes to get as much thing as possible. And then I'd get thrown in the back of a pickup truck with a plastic tarp covering the back of it, and we'd drive across the state to get to somewhere else. and I'd end up with a new school, new whole group of friends, or bullies, not friends, because I never really had any friends. I had what I would consider disaster groupies. I say that because when you're going through all that crazy, dark, intense stuff, people want to be around you just to watch the car crash and just kind of watch the flame out.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took, I was fat, I was smelly, I was sensitive, I liked comic books way back before people like kids who like comic books. It was not only not cool. Well, I do too, but back then it was not only not cool, but it was actively damaging to your coolness to like comic books. Mm-hmm. So it was a very rough time for me, and I took that being the ugly one. I took that as my identity. Everybody says I'm nasty, so I guess that's just me. And as I grew older, that darkness got really comforting. When you live in that kind of pain for so long, it becomes so normal that anything that comes at you that seems nice as it actually seems fake. Mm. So by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I had been told that I was worthless, that I was nothing, that I wasn't going to amount to anything, that I was just the fat, smelly one, that I couldn't do it, that anything I tried I couldn't do. And I was told that enough that I believed it. And when you are told that you're worthless enough, you're going to believe it. And then you're going to do everything you can to make everybody else agree with you too. And that's exactly what I did. I made myself even more unappealing, made myself even more disgusting. And I started to take that self-hatred out on myself in cutting. About 13, 14 years old, I started cutting myself. And I did that because my life at the time was I would come home from school and walk in the door, and there'd be a massive fight going on because someone didn't get enough crack that day. Like literally, that would be the fight going on. And I would have to pull my drunken stepdad off of beating my mom, and then she would jump up and hit me because I pulled him off of her. And so now I'm in the middle of both of them attacking me just because I tried to stop a fight. And that's just, and then 5 minutes later, they act like nothing happened and try to serve me dinner. And it's like, I can't take this. I described it like a giant tornado and tsunami of emotion. Like I was living in this big hurricane of pain that was just swirling around, and I had no control over anything. And I felt like my life was a movie, and I wasn't a star in it at all. Like I was just an audience member, just sitting in the audience, just watching my life go by. And I remember telling a lot of people around back then that I felt absolutely invisible. I felt for a long time like if I left a room, people wouldn't even remember I was in that room. Like I was that forgettable that no one would even remember that I was there. Because I went to some schools when I was moving around so much. Some of those schools I went to 2 or 3 times. Like there was one elementary school I went to, Iber. It's here in Colorado. I think I went to that school 3 times. I think I went there for kindergarten. I think I came back for 2nd grade. Then I think I came back for 5th grade. Now, to me, I had been at the school. Like I knew the place. But each time I was completely a new kid. Because each time I was there, I wasn't even there long enough to establish any roots for anybody to know me, when I came back the 2nd time. So even though I knew the place, nobody knew me. And that happened often in my life. There would be 3 or 4 schools where that happened because we would move to the same kind of towns, and we would just bounce from place to place. And it was, it became, the only thing I had control over was cutting myself, because that was a pain that was mine. Even though it was dark and even though it was painful, even though I was ripping my skin open and blood dripping down my arm, it was my pain. I controlled it, and it was real. And nothing else in my life felt real. Everything I had could vanish at a moment. Like when you have to every couple of weeks, every couple of months, have everything in your world get lost. Like growing up, I had all the toys that I wanted because my parents stole a bunch of toy trucks. So I had like He-Man and Transformers and all that stuff, but they would all get vanished because we'd have to leave. And so I would just lose. Nothing in my life was permanent. Mm-hmm. And so as I start, and
that builds a lot of anxiety.
Violence, it does. Fight or flight response people talk about, I felt like I was constantly living in that fight response because I had to
In
fight
survival
for
mode.
everything. In survival mode. I would call myself the human cockroach. Like, I'm going to survive somehow, but it's going to be in the worst possible situation. And as I grew older, 15, 16 years old, the violence at home started to get really bad. My stepdad was a massive alcoholic. My mom was a massive alcoholic and drug user. They both were tons and tons of crack cocaine and alcohol. And the violence got so bad that I couldn't take it, and I started living on the streets. And I had spent about 6 months either sleeping on the gravel outside of my then girlfriend's house because I couldn't sleep in her house because her parents wouldn't let me in, or I would sleep in the park behind Casa Bonita, which is a restaurant here in Colorado. Oh, and on that point, people always say that that you're in that state, you can't get a girl. In fact, that disaster groupie thing, that was the one problem I never had. I always ended up having a girlfriend, but they weren't even actually friends. They just wanted to watch the car crash like everybody else. And so that space that I was living in, that whole kind of sleeping in the pavement, living in the field, and cutting myself constantly at night. And it started to get about to winter time. And during this time, I had one actual friend, and his name's Mike. And Mike was the polar opposite of me. So Mike lived in one of the houses that we moved in. Mike lived at the opposite end of the block. And we met over comic books. And we both liked comic books and superheroes, and we started talking about that. And we just became best friends immediately. And every time I would move, Mike was like home base. Like, I memorized his phone number. His parents never moved. They still live in the same house that he grew up in. He had a nice, supporting, loving family. They never had that kind of violence, never had those kind of fights. Very peaceful. And so his house was always like the one safe spot that I could go. So
it's good
when
that you
I'm
had
in
him.
that home,
It's good that you had him.
Oh, it's just life-saving that I had him in many, many ways. So he was the only one that ever treated me like I was actually like a person with respect. Like, when we talked, we would have deep intellectual discussions about some extremely intelligent topics. When I couldn't talk about that kind of stuff with anybody because I'd get looked down on. But with Mike, there wasn't any kind of barriers. I was an equal, and that was it. And so when I was homeless and that 15, 16 years old, his house kind of became my last resort home base. His parents didn't like to let me stay in the house because I was really smelly, really dirty. I would steal his things. I would lie to him. I would treat him terribly. So I was a legitimate bad influence. So I can understand now why they didn't want me to stay there. But he would let me sleep in the shed in the backyard. And he would sneak me out dinner. And I would, on the really cold nights when it was raining or snowing, I would go to his shed and I would sleep in the thing there. And he had a big, great chair, like a big puffy recliner chair, and it was dirty and covered in cobwebs and shit because the place had slats. The roof had slats and holes in it. And so the rain and soot would come falling down, and it would all just cover it with this like schmoz and mush all over the chair. And so but that's where I would sleep. And so it finally came. Well, I had finally got to the very bottom. I was sitting in this chair. It was like 3:00 in the morning. It was raining out, and it was going to be snowing. It was freezing cold. I hadn't had any food for a couple days. I hadn't had anywhere to sleep. And I was pooling blood on the floor underneath me. And I'm looking down. I'm like, I need to get help. My arm is just covered in blood. I'm slicing my arm open. And I need to get myself some help. I'm going to die if I don't get myself some help. And so the next morning, I get up and I go knock on Mike's mom's back door and ask for the phone book. And because over the years, the people would come and try to intervene, and social workers and stuff, so I knew that social workers might help. So I tried to call social services. And I set up a meeting for later that day. And I go in there. And when I come in, I go in the room, and they didn't just bring me in there. They also called my mom in.